Hi, everyone. And this YouTube video will be a short little summary of the content for the November 18th class with the focus on physician-assisted suicide, death with dignity, medical aid in dying. So let me first start by with a little summary here. By Tuesday, November 23rd, which is when we'll see each other again, like you to finish these activities, these things. So again, even though there's no class on, I keep looking at my calendar here, Thursday, November 18th, everything needs to be done by Tuesday, the 23rd. First of all, I'd like you to read the articles that are posted on the Blackboard site, and they're in the folder for November 16th. We started the film, How to Die in Oregon. I'd like you to finish that. We left off at about 29 minutes and 50 seconds. So you can start it from there, or you can start from the beginning. It'll take you through basically the experience of Cody Curtis, introduce you to Nancy, who really was part of the efforts to legalize physician-assisted suicide in the state of Washington. A few other people you'll be introduced to, but it'll mainly be Nancy and, of course, Cody that will take you to the end. I want you to go through this YouTube lecture, which is not going to be too long. And there's a class activity. And the class activity is based on a case a number of years ago from the New England Journal of Medicine, the case of John Wallace. You'll see it on the Blackboard site, and then there's a class activity assignment associated with it. It's actually a really good summary because there is an argument in favor of physician-assisted suicide and an argument against. Your assignment is to really decide which one is the better argument for or against, and your rationale why. Okay, so let me go on with a few things that I wanted to share with you. Also on your Blackboard site is a document, and this is just a screenshot of the document. As I discussed earlier, there's about 10 states that have legalized this idea of death with dignity, originally known as physician-assisted suicide from Oregon. One of those states is Maine. And so it wasn't too hard. It's not too hard at all to find the information on the process for death with dignity in the state of Maine. Every state has really made this transparent. It is because it's a law, it's connected to usually a health department, the state health department. But this PDF document, the screenshot, is the request. A request that an individual makes, the first request, for medication to end my life in a humane and dignified manner. Now, what I think is interesting about this, oh, as I move this around, sorry about that, is, well, I think I'm moving all over the place here. So where did my thing go? Now I've lost everything. It's really a shame. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. It's here somewhere. There it is. Excellent. It's back at least. Okay, temporary malfunction. The idea of, what was I saying? Oh, yes, in a humane manner. And so, and dignified, thus the idea of dignity and humanity come into this. This is just a few-page document. And of course, at the bottom of the first page, I understand that I have the right to rescind this request at any time. This essentially is a consent form. But I think what's interesting about this, and most of the states have something similar, is the second paragraph, where it says, I've been fully informed of my diagnosis and prognosis, the nature of the medication to be prescribed, the potential risk, the expected result, and the feasible alternatives, and those are defined: palliative care and comfort care, hospice care, pain control, and disease-directed treatment options. So something to actually treat me. And this is really part of the process when it comes to medical aid in dying, assisted suicide, that the alternatives have to really be understood, because there's no going back, even though an individual can change their mind, not take the medication, or die before they take the medication. But the idea is there's no going back. So this is an example. It's not very hard to find other examples. And so what I'd like to do is really just sort of state, I gotta move this out of my way because it's bugging me here. I can't really see that. Arguments for and against physician-assisted suicide. And so I'm going to write those down. Even though it's here in the recording, I'm going to urge you to really take note of this, which means write it down or type it in, just so you have a sense of this as well. So the primary, let's just do this in hopefully a way that makes sense. It's fairly obvious that the number one reason why individuals are in support of any form of physician-assisted suicide is it supports autonomy. And it supports autonomy not just because we have been speaking about autonomy, it values choice, and really it's the final choice, especially when an individual in this situation has lost so many of their choices because of their illness. And that includes the ability to eat, perhaps, ability to function on a daily basis. So we're not just talking about the ability to engage with people or drive a car. We're talking about health. They can sort of see this happening to them, but they're cognitively able to make the decision themselves. Now, alongside this, a primary argument against physician-assisted suicide is that it's hard to see how this isn't, directly, this is intentionally, the intention is there, ending life. So intentionally ending life. Now, as you remember, this is regarded as a form of passive euthanasia. Passive because the individual itself is ingesting the medication, the physician is prescribing the medication, but the individual is taking that medication. But the intention is to end life. I think one of the comments in the first part of How to Die in Oregon by a woman who was essentially connected to the Death with Dignity Act is she wanted to exit life. And so exit, ending life, it's sort of a similar term. On the same side, going along with arguments for is it ends suffering. And talk about physical suffering. I think Cody's a great example of it. Sort of the emotional suffering. I also think about a individual like Bill Brooks, who made a comment that, sometimes I just wish I could exit this and go out and shoot myself. And I know he was so frustrated. He was on an emotional roller coaster as he was declining in health. Now, suffering, especially whether it be physical or emotional, psychological suffering, we do have palliative care options for that. Pain medication. They're not, doesn't totally alleviate, might not alleviate the suffering. Physician-assisted suicide ends the suffering as well. Arguments against it directly, or let's say, yes, it directly, what's the form? What's the word I want to use? Let's say it directly involves healthcare professionals. As you know, healthcare professionals are not required to participate in any state's Death with Dignity Act. Those who do, it's their choice, but it's hard not to see how it really goes against the profession. Now, you might be able to make an argument like Dr. Morris did, Catherine Morris, that's Cody Curtis's physician, that she's her physician. She really has to be here to support her autonomy. But really, the role of a healthcare professional is to help people. It might not be to help people die. In fact, it's to help them live. It's help them progress. But it perhaps changes the notion of what a healthcare professional does. And essentially, somebody told me once, it's like the physician in this case, because the physician writes the prescription, is driving the getaway car to a bank robbery. So they're not going in the bank. They might not have a weapon with them. They're not holding people hostage, but they're waiting outside and they're complicit in the action. So it maybe tarnishes the idea of what a healthcare professional should be. On the on the plus side, again, what it also might do, and you see that perhaps in Cody's case, it allows loved ones and individuals to prepare. In fact, you can almost choose the date and time. It becomes an event, and I don't say that in a way to make fun of this, but it allows individuals, if they've decided to do this, certainly they can do it alone, but most people don't. They gather those who are close to them, who are there to support them. And you see that in Cody's case, to be with them as well. I think a key aspect against physician-assisted suicide is that, as far as I know, all the world's religions are opposed to this because in some ways it's very much akin to suicide. So it really goes against faith. I should have put toward one's faith. Wherever you are in terms of faith, because the intention is clear. And so anyone who has a sense of their faith and wants to practice it becomes challenging for them. It becomes an issue. We also, earlier when we were speaking about issues at the beginning of life, spoke about the ethical and religious directives for Catholic healthcare. It is explicitly in the documents and the ERDs that all forms of assisted suicide violate the tenets of Catholic faith and are immoral. And so it really goes against, as far as I know, every faith, the world's major religions. I'll just sort of go along with this, that does it mean that the person is giving up? Cody mentions in the film that, is she considered a coward for doing this? It has this negative connotation, obviously, giving up because, so they're giving up their life. Is it similar to suicide? And one last argument in support: when an individual has decided to participate in this, certainly they've made their expectations clear, and so they're cognitively able to do this, and there are very clear expectations. So just with those are sort of the basic ones in terms of this notion of where physician-assisted suicide, medical aid in dying, death with dignity fall into play. Okay. I'm just going to have one more set of thoughts here before And I do want you to really focus on all of the bullet points that I spoke about at the beginning in terms of reading the articles and watching the film and engaging in the class activity. Certainly the idea of this topic is growing, but most states in the country, most states have not legalized it. And the idea, my sense is that many states will never legalize it, not in your lifetime as well, including the state where we are. It is an interesting notion, and this is sort of my summary comments, that this is referred to initially as death with dignity, and as a dignified way, as maybe even a more proper way to die. The terms clean or efficient or tidy come into play. Now, that's sort of a strange way of looking at one's passing, at one's death, but really this notion of dignity here has more to do with control, that the individual is in control of when they die. That rarely happens. That rarely happens. Perhaps we wish for it to happen, but not in the history of humanity have individuals been in control of when they die, the exact moment, unless, of course, they take their own life, which is, in a sense, a part of the argument that you can make here. Okay, so again, this is an issue, a theme, like abortion, one that perhaps many of you have not thought about or thought about even taking a side in. And I'm not asking you to take a side. I'm asking you to understand the issues. As I said in class, the film How to Die in Oregon, it is a one-sided film. It's one-sided because it follows the narrative, the story of certain individuals, and it's impossible not to be emotionally connected to them. So it's like any other documentary, we tend to cheer for them or on their side, but it's important here to understand all the sides as well. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. I think you all know what you have to do by our next class meeting, November 23rd. Otherwise, feel free to reach out with any questions along the way. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.